My nephew is an environmentalist who believes that walking on 2 legs consumes a huge amount of energy and is a waste. So he wanted to cut off his legs. My younger brother was moved by my nephew's selflessness and determination. So he brought a chainsaw and offered to saw off my nephew's legs himself as a show of support. My sister-in-law also thought my nephew was a responsible and good kid and believed he would be very successful in the future, leading humanity into a new era. But my parents, having lived for decades longer, thought things through more carefully than my sister-in-law. They specifically bought hemostatic medicine and bandages to prevent my nephew from losing too much blood. With the effort of the 3 of them, my nephew lost his legs and successfully survived. But he soon discovered that crawling on his hands every day without legs was much more tiring. Not only that, but he had to look up at people every day and his neck was constantly sore. My nephew then felt that his head was the biggest energy consumer and decided to cut it off. My parents realized the seriousness of the situation and quickly stopped him. After much persuasion, my nephew swore he would be more involved in environmental protection in the future. But later, my nephew fell in love with a well-connected young man from a wealthy family, who was in the same dorm, and confessed his feelings. However, the young man said, "Where are your legs? What kind of love can you have without legs?" It turned out the young man had a severe leg fetish and rejected my nephew for not having a pair of long legs. My nephew was heartbroken and went home to confide in his sister-in-law. She, in turn, scolded him for crying over a trivial matter, saying it wasn't the behavior of someone who could lead humanity forward. She then beat him and threw him out of the house. My nephew wandered the streets and saw my parents from a distance. He suddenly remembered that if they hadn't stopped him from cutting off his head, he would have become a revered environmental pioneer. He thought that maybe the wealthy young man would have even entered a business marriage with him for his commercial value. My nephew hated my parents bitterly. He called me, and together we arranged for them to meet us on a rooftop to get revenge by pushing them off. I also conveniently called my sister-in-law to the rooftop. After the 3 of them arrived, they asked me what was going on. Seeing that my nephew hadn't shown up, I went downstairs to look for him and locked the rooftop door behind me. Halfway down, I saw my nephew passed out on the ground. It turned out he had fainted from exhaustion while crawling up the stairs. I quickly took him to the hospital for treatment, but after a night of rescue efforts, my nephew unfortunately passed away. I was heartbroken and in a state of grief for several days. After I received the call about the family deaths, I remembered that my sister-in-law and the other 2 were still on the rooftop. So, with my whole family gone, I sold the old family house, bought a large luxurious apartment, and lived the rest of my life smoothly. When I passed away peacefully and closed my eyes, I reopened them to find that I had been reborn. In my dream, I felt my life gradually fading. Suddenly, the screeching of a chainsaw woke me up. I felt a rush of strength fill my body and I sat up abruptly, finding myself in my old bedroom. I looked at myself in the mirror and saw that I was young again. I was reborn. My eyes were filled with disbelief. Then I heard the roaring of the chainsaw again, and this time I finally realized it was coming from outside the door. Curiously, I pushed the door open, and what I saw was my sister-in-law holding a chainsaw. She was looking at it and muttering, "What's wrong? Why won't it start? Is it broken?" My nephew, Zhang Yaozu, was lying on the coffee table, looking impatient and urging her to hurry. Seeing this, my dad pushed my sister-in-law away, took the chainsaw, and looked at it for a long time before realizing it had no power. He cursed, "Useless. Get out of the way. I'll do it." My dad plugged in the chainsaw, pressed the switch and raised it, shouting, "Yaozu, I'm coming for you." Zhang Yaozu gritted his teeth, looking resolute, and shouted back, "Grandpa, go ahead." My dad was about to swing the chainsaw towards Zhang Yaozu, but at that moment, I approached him from behind and patted his shoulder. My dad was startled and let out a scream, the chainsaw flying from his hand in an arc towards my mom. My mom was focused on Zhang Yaozu when she heard my dad scream and looked up. She saw the chainsaw was gone from his hand and was about to ask where it went when she heard a sound above her head. She looked up and the chainsaw came down, its sharp teeth plunging into her eyes. She shrieked, and in an instant flesh and blood flew everywhere. She desperately grabbed the chainsaw handle, trying to wrench it away, but the intense pain made her unable to control her strength. She just pulled wildly, barely preventing the saw from cutting further down. At this moment, my dad reacted and rushed over to help my mom remove the chainsaw. But just then, my mom accidentally exerted force, yanking the saw out. It flew off her, spinning in the air, and hit my dad's outstretched wrist. With a ripping sound, the blade tore through his flesh. My dad's entire hand was severed. He screamed and fell to the ground, clutching his wrist and struggling as blood splattered everywhere. My mom heard my dad scream and wanted to know what was wrong, but she was completely blind. She fumbled forward for a couple steps and accidentally kicked the chainsaw. The chainsaw, lubricated by the blood, slid forward. In my dad's despairing gaze, it was drawn by the motor and deeply embedded itself into his body. My dad writhed and struggled, and although he managed to throw the chainsaw off, he slowly closed his eyes from excessive blood loss. My mom couldn't hear my dad's voice anymore and frantically asked him what was wrong. In her panic, she accidentally stepped on my dad's blood, slipped and fell to the ground, her forehead landing directly on the chainsaw. My sister-in-law and Zhang Yaozu were frozen in shock at the sight. After a while, they turned and looked at each other. My sister-in-law asked in a trembling voice, "Yaozu, do you still want to saw your legs?" Zhang Yaozu, terrified by the blood and severed limbs on the floor, stuttered, I. At that moment I walked over, pulled Zhang Yaozu up and said, "Yaozu, you don't have to saw your legs. Zhang Yaozu looked at me with gratitude, tears welling up in his eyes. I continued. Yaozu, if you saw your legs, only you will save a little energy, but everyone else will still waste it. Hearing this, Zhang Yaozu was finally able to speak, asking, Then what should I do, auntie? I slowly replied. Yaozu, you should do something easy for others to imitate, so everyone can learn from you to save energy. Zhang Yaozu shed tears of gratitude and tightly held my hand, sobbing. Auntie, thank you, truly thank you. My sister-in-law also came over and asked me, Yanan, what do you think is easy to imitate? I had anticipated her question and said without hesitation, Eating shit. Zhang Yaozu's eyes widened and he instinctively asked, Why? I shrugged and said, Look, first, everyone poops, which means it's an easily obtainable thing. Second, there are a lot of undigested nutrients in it. If you eat it and digest it again, you can reduce food consumption, which in turn reduces energy consumption. After hearing my words, my sister-in-law and Zhang Yaozu took a long breath in extreme shock. Then my sister-in-law was the first to react, grabbing my hand and saying, Oh, Yanan, you're amazing. You've helped Yaozu and me a lot. And Zhang Yaozu, grateful that he no longer had to saw off his legs, gladly accepted my suggestion. My sister-in-law was a woman of action. She immediately grabbed Zhang Yaozu and took him to the toilet. Coincidentally, my sister-in-law felt the urge, so she pooped right in front of Zhang Yaozu. Then she pointed to the feces floating in the toilet and said to him, Yaozu, eat it. Zhang Yaozu looked at the feces with a conflicted expression, but my sister-in-law kept urging him on. He also thought about his mission to save the earth, so he steeled himself and plunged his head into the toilet, drinking it down heartily. However, as soon as he took a bite before he could swallow, a foul odor spread between his teeth, and he nearly suffocated. Just then, my sister-in-law stopped him and told him not to swallow. My sister-in-law took out her phone, opened a strange live streaming app, and started a broadcast. Hello, everyone. Today I'm going to show you my son eating shit for the sake of environmental protection. She waved at the audience and turned the camera to Zhang Yaozu, saying, Yaozu, open your mouth and let them see. Zhang Yaozu looked pained but still did as she said. The viewers in the live stream saw the yellowish-brown paste on Zhang Yaozu's mouth and started discussing. Then, a viewer sent my sister-in-law a gift. She got very excited and urged Zhang Yaozu to swallow quickly. He craned his neck and forced the feces down. As he swallowed, more and more people joined the live stream, and the gifts kept coming. My sister-in-law was so excited by the gifts that she grabbed Zhang Yaozu's head and forced him into the toilet, compelling him, Yaozu, eat another bite. Mom's live stream is about to reach 10,000 viewers. It turned out the reason my sister-in-law was so enthusiastic about his environmentalism was to gain popularity for her live stream with his bizarre behavior. Zhang Yaozu was caught off guard, and water rushed into his throat. He struggled desperately, but there were also feces in the water, and he accidentally inhaled some. In this moment of life and death, he erupted with unprecedented strength. He forced his head up and shouted, Sister-in-law, hey, hey. He clutched his throat, coughing out 2 clumps of feces and gasping for air. My sister-in-law's first thought was to check the live stream. Is he eating or not? If not, I'm leaving. This is boring. Fake eating for attention. My sister-in-law looked at the dwindling number of viewers and panicked. She quickly got up and yelled at Zhang Yaozu, Yaozu, hurry up and eat. People are leaving the live stream. But Zhang Yaozu, having just faced death, had a complete change of character. Enraged by her words, he picked up a clump of feces and threw it at her, shouting, Get out! You eat it yourself. My sister-in-law didn't expect this and was hit directly in the face. She screamed, wiped the feces off her face, and then in a rage charged at Zhang Yaozu. She raised her hand to punch him, but he didn't back down. He stood up and punched her back, and neither of them dodged. They started fighting, punching and kicking each other. As their fight grew more intense, the live stream's popularity rose again, and the comment section encouraged them to fight more fiercely. My sister-in-law heard the sound of gifts being sent. She looked pleased, broke away from Zhang Yaozu, and crawled to her phone. She looked at the screen full of gifts and kept thanking the viewers. But while she was distracted, Zhang Yaozu quietly came up behind her. He wrapped his arm around her neck in a chokehold. She grabbed at his arm, trying to break free, but he tightened his grip. The lack of oxygen made her mind hazy, and her body went limp. Her phone slipped from her hand, fell to the ground, and miraculously landed upright against the wall in the corner of the bathroom. But this was no good thing. My parents' bloody corpses were still in the living room. The viewers in the live stream were horrified, and the stream was shut down for showing a bloody scene. My sister-in-law saw the closed live stream, and her last bit of strength vanished. He fainted. Zhang Yaozu, venting his rage, still gritted his teeth and tightened his arm. His eyes filled with madness. I sighed, walked over to him and placed my hand on his arm, saying, Yaozu, let go. Your sister-in-law is already dead. Hearing this, he gradually calmed down and released her. She fell to the ground like a broken rag doll. Zhang Yaozu shuffled back a bit, looking at her body, and his heart was filled with mixed emotions. Tears streamed down his face, but a smile was on his lips, and it was impossible to tell whether he was sad or happy. Afterward, Zhang Yaozu's life returned to normal. Without his sister-in-law's instigation, he never mentioned environmentalism again and just lived his days eating and drinking. One day, as I was taking him to his university's campus, I was worried about what had happened with the wealthy young man in the previous life. At the registration desk, I carefully checked his clothes and said, "Yaozu, when you go in, roll up your pants. It's too hot to be covered up." Zhang Yaozu looked at me strangely but nodded and went into the school. I watched him go, wondering if this would really change the future. He dragged his luggage to the dorm room door and, thinking about what I had said, looked down at his pants, contemplating. Should I really do that? After thinking for a while, he suddenly, as if possessed, took off his pants and pushed open the dorm room door, swinging his manhood happily. As soon as he entered, he saw a shocking scene. The two people already in the room were a cold-faced man with his hand on the chin of another man with a stoic face. The latter's face was flushed, and his expression was ambiguous. His tongue was gently touching the cold-faced man's wrist. The cold-faced man was about to lean in and kiss the stoic man's face when Zhang Yaozu's sudden entry interrupted them. They both looked at him. Zhang Yaozu first looked at their faces, then felt the heat from their gazes. He found it hard to breathe, and his heart pounded. His manhood couldn't help but get an erection. Seeing his manhood, the two men looked at each other and smiled playfully. They walked towards Zhang Yaozu, one on each side, and placed their hands on his shoulders. Their warm breaths blew into his ears as they whispered softly, "Welcome, new roommate." Zhang Yaozu's body went weak, and he nearly fell, but the two men held him up. He breathed heavily through his nose, and his eyes became hazy with desire. He couldn't help but reach out and touch the two men beside him. Far from resisting, they grabbed his hands and placed them on their faces. They both said in a seductive voice, "Is this how you get to know your roommates?" Zhang Yaozu couldn't hold back his excitement anymore. He let out a scream, his body convulsed, and he fainted. After some time, he woke up to find himself in his bed, with his comforter already made. "What happened to me?" he asked, sitting up and holding his head. He felt dizzy and was about to fall forward. A pair of hands reached out and held him steady. He caught his breath and looked up. It was the cold-faced man. The man had lost his cold demeanor, but his face was still serene. Zhang Yaozu said, "Thank you." The man said, "We're roommates, no need to thank me. My name is Zhao Tianxi. What's your name?" Zhang Yaozu was stunned. He realized the man was the wealthy young man from the previous life. He nervously told him his name. His mind filled with the ambiguous scene he had just witnessed. He thought he was going to be killed for discovering the young man's secret. Zhao Tianxi saw him trembling and thought he was worried about being silenced. He took Zhang Yaozu's hand and whispered to comfort him. "It's okay, it's no big deal." Then Zhao Tianxi gave a charming smile and whispered in his ear, "If you want, you can join us." Zhang Yaozu's imagination ran wild. Zhao Tianxi just chuckled, waved his hand and said, "I'm just kidding, don't worry about it." He explained that the other man was Wang Guangzong, a young master from another wealthy family. "I'll introduce him to you later." Zhang Yaozu was surprised again. He couldn't believe such a small dorm room had two major figures from the wealthy circles. At that moment, Wang Guangzong came out of the bathroom. He was only wearing a bath towel, and his muscular body was exposed. His wet hair covered his eyes, and his gaze towards Zhang Yaozu seemed unusual. He walked slowly to Zhang Yaozu, pulled off the towel, and threw it on his bed, standing naked. Zhang Yaozu quickly covered his eyes, afraid of offending him, but Wang Guangzong didn't mind. His voice was calm as he said, "It's okay. We monks have to be honest and open with each other." Zhang Yaozu peeked through his fingers and was captivated by his stoic but muscular physique. After a while, Zhang Yaozu calmed down and asked what the two of them had been doing earlier. Zhao Tianxi thought for a moment, and his hand unconsciously started stroking Zhang Yaozu's leg. After a long pause, he didn't explain. Instead, he took his other hand, lifted Zhang Yaozu's chin, and kissed him directly on the lips. Zhang Yaozu's eyes widened in surprise, but he was soon conquered by the passionate kiss. His body went limp, and he fell into Zhao Tianxi's arms. Zhao Tianxi's fingers lightly scratched his leg, feeling the rough texture of his leg hair. He finally pulled away from Zhang Yaozu's lips, satisfied. He said, "You passed the test." Then he explained, "Wang Guangzong and I are members of the leg fetish cult. We were just having a teaching exchange." Zhang Yaozu looked at Wang Guangzong and asked, "Aren't you a monk? How did you become a member of the leg fetish cult?" Wang Guangzong's face didn't change as he replied, "Our founder meditated for several years, and his feet must have been drenched in sweat. Just thinking about that gives me a thrill." Wang Guangzong became excited, inhaling deeply as if he were at the founder's feet. He continued, "Then I discovered the leg fetish cult and thought they were similar to me, so I joined." Zhang Yaozu was even more shocked, but Wang Guangzong clearly didn't want to explain further. Zhao Tianxi took over, holding Zhang Yaozu's hand and pleading, "Yaozu, will you join the leg fetish cult?" Zhang Yaozu was about to refuse, but he saw Zhao Tianxi's sincere eyes, and the words just wouldn't come out. He finally sighed and said, "Okay, I'll join." Zhao Tianxi laughed, and he and Wang Guangzong immediately grabbed Zhang Yaozu and rushed out of the dorm. On the way, Zhao Tianxi felt a little hungry and bought something to eat. After 2 bites, he found it disgusting and threw it on the ground. A homeless man rushed over and picked up the food, about to eat it. Zhao Tianxi's face turned cold. He snatched the food, threw it forcefully on the ground, and waved for Wang Guangzong to come over. Wang Guangzong saw Zhao Tianxi's smirk and immediately understood. He stood beside him, and the two of them smiled wickedly, squatted down and defecated on the food. Zhao Tianxi laughed and said, "Eat it. Why aren't you eating?" They surrounded the homeless man, mocking him. Zhang Yaozu watched their actions, and long-buried memories surfaced. He was back in that afternoon when his sister-in-law forced him to eat feces on the livestream. He shrieked, his eyes filled with madness, and he rushed over. He grabbed Zhao Tianxi and Wang Guangzong's heads and slammed them into the feces. Zhang Yaozu was like a madman, repeatedly slamming their heads into the ground. He screamed, "Environmental protection. The future. It's because of people like you that the earth is going to be destroyed." Suddenly his hands stopped, but not on their own. Zhao Tianxi and Wang Guangzong had forcibly stopped him. Zhang Yaozu didn't see their grim faces. At this moment, their eyes rolled up into their sockets as if to look at him through their skulls. In the next second, Wang Guangzong grabbed Zhang Yaozu and forcefully pried his hands open. He slowly stood up. The intense pain contorted Zhang Yaozu's face. But he was in a state of madness and endured the pain, letting Wang Guangzong break his hands. He used the moment his joints dislocated to get closer to Wang Guangzong and bit down on his manhood. He shook his head violently, tearing off Wang Guangzong's manhood. Wang Guangzong screamed and rolled on the ground. But before Zhang Yaozu could catch his breath, Zhao Tianxi also got up. He landed a hook on Zhang Yaozu's face, and Wang Guangzong's manhood fell from his mouth, leaving a bloody trail on the ground. Zhao Tianxi wiped the feces off his face, looked at the remaining brownish-yellow stain on his hand, cursed, and was about to beat Zhang Yaozu. But Zhang Yaozu lunged at him first, pinning him down. He reached his right hand into Zhao Tianxi's mouth, grabbed his tongue and pulled it out with all his might. Zhao Tianxi made muffled sounds of pain, and his thighs strained. His knees repeatedly hitting Zhang Yaozu's manhood to force him to let go. But Zhang Yaozu's adrenaline was pumping, and he couldn't feel any pain. He held on to Zhao Tianxi's tongue for dear life, about to tear it off. At that moment, Wang Guangzong, covered in blood, stood in front of Zhang Yaozu. His expression was sinister. He grabbed Zhang Yaozu's hair, pulled his head back and punched his face repeatedly. After a few punches, Zhang Yaozu's face was covered in blood, but he still wouldn't let go of Zhao Tianxi's tongue. Wang Guangzong got frustrated and elbowed him in the face. Under the heavy blows, Zhang Yaozu's body couldn't take it anymore. He released his grip. His eyes rolled back and he fell to the ground, unconscious. Zhao Tianxi and Wang Guangzong breathed heavily, looking at him on the ground. They silently dragged him away. After an unknown amount of time, Zhang Yaozu woke up. He tried to move but found himself tied to a cross. "What's going on? Let me go," he shrieked. At that moment, countless torches lit up the dark room. He looked around and saw the room was filled with people in black robes. Two of them walked out from the crowd, Wang Guangzong and Zhao Tianxi. "Yaozu, welcome to the leg fetish cult." Hearing this, his will to live surged. He desperately yelled, I'll join. Please let me down." But Zhao Tianxi just laughed and said, "What are you talking about, Yaozu? You're our sacrifice for this ritual." Zhang Yaozu was stunned. He trembled, wanting to say something. Zhao Tianxi walked forward and caressed his leg, praising it. "I've never felt such an evenly distributed rough texture of leg hair before. It's wonderful. The leg god will be very pleased with this sacrifice." It turned out that the moment Zhang Yaozu walked into the dorm room with his pants on, Zhao Tianxi and Wang Guangzong had set their sights on his legs and decided to make him their sacrifice. Now the ritual began. A chainsaw was passed from the crowd. Zhao Tianxi took it, pressed the switch, and walked slowly towards Zhang Yaozu as the saw roared to life. "Don't be afraid, Yaozu. It will be over soon." Zhao Tianxi gave a morbid smile. Just as the saw was about to cut into Zhang Yaozu, his will to live exploded with immense strength. He broke the chains holding him. His feet were still tied to the cross, and he fell forward. Zhao Tianxi was startled and froze. Zhang Yaozu took the opportunity to grab the chainsaw and, with one swing, cut the cross in half. He used the momentum to free himself, spun in the air and kicked the cross. It flew into the crowd. Screams rang out from the crowd. Zhao Tianxi reacted and tried to stop him, but Zhang Yaozu showed no mercy. He swung the chainsaw down, cutting Zhao Tianxi in two. Then he charged into the crowd, swinging the chainsaw with ferocity. Flesh and blood flew everywhere. But under such high-intensity use, the chainsaw started smoking and overloaded. Zhang Yaozu threw it away. He looked at the still dense crowd and took a fighting stance. The crowd watched him and whispered, "Good legs, what a pair of legs." Then, a group of people rushed at him fearlessly. Zhang Yaozu clicked his tongue and punched one of them to the ground. But more people charged, and he was gradually overwhelmed. He was finally pinned to the ground, and he let out a cry of despair, thinking, "Am I going to die here today?" But at that moment, the blood and flesh on the ground mysteriously floated up into the air, merging to form a giant ring. From the ring, a creature made entirely of legs crawled out. When the crowd saw it, they prostrated themselves and chanted, "It's the leg god! The leg god has descended!" The leg god looked down on its followers. Then it focused on Zhang Yaozu and slowly picked him up with a toe. He was terrified and in despair. But then he heard the leg god making inhuman groans. He listened carefully and was surprised to find that he could understand the leg god's words. "Can I lick your legs?" Zhang Yaozu slowly repeated the words. He was shocked to find that the leg god was a sycophant. The leg god waited for his answer. Zhang Yaozu thought for a moment, then sneered and pointed at the people on the ground, shouting, "If you kill all of them, I'll agree to let you lick my legs." The leg god didn't hesitate. It let out a roar, and countless feet stomped on the ground, instantly crushing all the cult members. Then the leg god held Zhang Yaozu in front of it and carefully began to lick. But at that moment, the leg god screamed, and its body began to swell. Zhang Yaozu was confused, but the ring behind the leg god also started to collapse. He then realized that the leg god had killed all its followers and lost its faith power. Now it was collapsing. Zhang Yaozu screamed, trying to escape, but it was too late. The leg god's body rapidly expanded and then exploded. A mushroom cloud rose, and the surrounding land was turned into ruins. Zhang Yaozu was killed in the explosion. So, with my whole family gone, I sold the old family house, bought a large luxurious apartment, and lived the rest of my life smoothly. The end of the story.